And today we are hosting Collin Gentry. Hi, everybody. Hi, Collin. We are Coping Life Talk. And Coping Life Talk is focused on how people cope naturally. And since we are in the midst of COVID and this pandemic, so we are talking about how people cope with everything in their lives, but also in the midst of this unusual time. Colin, you are a wonderful representative of the millennials. And as you see on the screen, we have a co-hostess and also we have a moderator, David Lawson. And because you raise such important questions when you and I talk, and the questions are how people coping this time, but also why do they cope so differently? And that's what I thought David maybe later will help us to elaborate on that topic, how it is related to age and any specifics to different class groups and also background of people. But also you see familiar faces on the screen, Candy Sheehan and Scott Kiddle, who are our co-hosts, and also you know them from where you are from St. Joseph, right? So we know you as a very compassionate and a very loving person, very caring, and you have so many edges of who you are. So I want you simply to ask you to introduce yourself. I know that you're a student at Missouri S&T, and also you're just a wonderful son and a wonderful grandson. And you can share with us today, and I hope many people who watch us today, they will get answers on their questions, because there are so many layers into these issues that you will be talking to us today and to the audience. Okay, welcome, Collin, and please introduce yourself.
Hi, Dr. Lydia. Thank you for having me on. This is my first time doing something like this, so hopefully it turns out okay. My name is Collin Gentry. I am a student here at Missouri University of Science and Technology. I'm a sophomore in aerospace engineering, and I have, I know I've known Candy for years. I've known Lydia for a long time now. I've been going to Francis Street First Church for my entire life, and I still go when I get the chance to visit home again. And here on the campus, I work as a resident assistant in the dorms. I'm an RA. And so I do get the chance to talk to a lot of different people. I have all my residents on my floor, some 20, 30 some residents, as well as all the other people I have to interact with. And so I really have gotten a good sense of the different kinds of people in my age group and how they are coping with all the various restrictions and guidelines that we need to follow and that I need to enforce. Because everyone really does kind of respond to it differently. You're right about that.
So the question I have to you, and we will start getting questions and comments today. So let me bring everybody on the screen. And you raised a very important question, because you are not just sharing about your own experience, but you are helping other students to cope during this time. And there are, as I said, multiple layers to this issue, because COVID touched every generation in a different way. And I know that David will help us to talk a little about that. But it is very interesting to me that millennials, so younger generation and the older generation, like baby boomers, they respond different to the stresses that we actually found ourselves in. And for example, older people, of course, they're afraid for their health, because we know that COVID attacks, first of all, people who are older. And at the same time, you think that millennials are now everywhere. Without millennials, we will not survive, right? People will not survive. They are working everywhere, stores, they deliver food, they deliver medicine, they work in the restaurants, and actually they expose themselves. And we see that they wear masks, and that's one of the questions I wanted to ask first. So from your experience, since we have such a different level of emotional response to COVID scare. So why is that the actually the emotional stress that older generation experience and the millennials is so different. So what is that difference? We know, as I mentioned, so older people worry about their retirement. They worry about losing jobs. They worry about not being connected to their grandchildren and families, and also, of course, for their health. It seems like you millennials are not as threatened in terms of your health, but still, why it is such a stress that younger people are under?
Yeah, so it is true that most science shows that people my age aren't as at risk for COVID and various complications. I mean, there is, of course, people can have comorbidities or other issues that can make it worse, and there's always the risk of passing it on to other people. And in my experience, that's generally the concern that people my age have, is not themselves getting it, but rather them passing it to other people who might be more hurt by it. Like, I know people who didn't want to go home for Thanksgiving break because they might have to interact with their grandparents or other people who, if they had gotten sick, they might infect them and cause significant problems. I think that the reason different generations are responding so differently to this and all the other crises going on, a lot of it comes from the points that we're at in our lives. So people my age group aren't at COVID didn't come at a time of significant stability for us, right? It happened, it was my freshman year last year when it happened, so my life was already a time of a lot of turmoil. I left a lot of my friends behind, I was in a new place, things were pretty strange already, and so now, new restrictions coming in place, now I can't see other people, things are changing again. It didn't hit us as hard, it feels like, because we are already kind of accustomed to the fact that at this point in our lives, everything is changing really quickly, everything is uncertain, we can kind of roll with the punches on that. And at the same time, millennials, Gen Z, I'm kind of at the borderline between the two generations. We're the internet generation. We have grown up. I don't remember a time in my life when there wasn't computers and social media and texting and everything like that. And so being forced to stay indoors, not being able to see people, that's not as big of a deal for us because we are already used to interacting with friends who live far away, and I feel like we can make the adaptation much easier to this new technology. When all the classes switched on to Zoom, it was oftentimes the students who would have to coach the professors through how to work with the technology. So, so people my generation are coming from, this is just another strange occurrence in our very strange couple decades that we've been alive, and that is how we can work with it a lot better than some other groups can, I think.
And you touched a very important question that we just received from one of our viewers, Julia Orden. She said exactly on that point about technology. She said, your generation don't remember times without technology, just like you said. Like she was reading your mind. Did the current situation, she said, change your outlook on the value and place of technology in your life?
That is a good question. Thank you for that. I think it did, because having to stay indoors a lot, I've had to both get to know technology better, to use it to interact with other people, but also try and find ways to help use technology to pass the time. So I find myself now, because of the fact that I can't go out and see friends, club activities aren't in person and stuff, we are getting much more accustomed to being able to do work and talk to people and be interactive online. So we're trying to find ways to make that seem more genuine. I've gotten a lot comfortable with having my face on a webcam and talking to people because that's the only way to do that now.
Yeah.
You're learning to appreciate being able to see people's faces from the nose down. So it's been an interesting transition, but I think that it's one that we've been able to make pretty well.
Interesting. And when people use so much technology and they spend so much time online, did you notice anything in your particular relationship with the family that it brings some kind of a strain? At least this is what I read about people who are at school, they're in college, they're in high school, and so here they have lots of lessons online. Then they have webinars. Then they have, of course, small groups, and of course they have the social time. And this is maybe right at the time when parents call. And parents, of course, like for example, you're on campus, parents miss you, and they call right in the middle when maybe you have a wonderful, lovely conversation with your friends. And so many young people share that it irritates them to pieces because the parents call right in the middle of something very interesting, and your social life, I'm not talking about you, I know that you're very loving and calm, very patient person. So I never seen you being angry or resentful and putting someone down, but other people do. And so how do you handle that when your parents call you right in the middle of something so interesting, when you want to talk to your friends, for example? So of course they understand classes. How would you recommend other young students, college students, high school students, school students to handle that they do not alienate and upset and hurt their parents who miss them?
Yeah, being separated from family for such a long time gets kind of weird. Like, normally during a given semester, like last year, I'd go home 2 or 3 times during a semester just for the weekends and stuff because it's not too difficult. But this semester, I was away from home for about 3 or 4 months until I finally got the chance to come home for Thanksgiving break. And that can get kind of frustrating for everyone involved. I imagine that my mom and dad are kind of worried about me at times, and so it was good to stay in regular contact. To people my age who are, might be wanting a little bit less of that contact, or just it's not coming at a time, just do keep in mind that, they care about you and they want to, they're probably worried about you as much as they are worried about themselves, and so it's good to interact with them. At the same time, I've always tried to stress to myself and to a lot of people that during this pandemic, time and schedules have kind of ceased to exist. I know it felt like March was the longest month in human history, and the rest of the year has just slipped by. I'm not even sure what day of the week it is most of the time. And so it can be easy to let things slip by, including talking to your family. And really for everyone involved, I would say you want to try and keep that schedule. You want to try and do the same things at the same time. Try and watch your lectures at the same time, do your homework at the same time, and call your family at the same time. I try to call my parents every couple weeks on the weekends, and so they know to be expecting a call from me usually on Saturdays or Sundays during the afternoon. And that works for us because we've been doing it for a while. And establishing routines with when you work and when you socialize and when you talk with your family is an important way of keeping all that stuff prioritized while also, staying sane.
That's very helpful, I think, to have a certain time, right? So I see that Candy has a question, and please, everybody, David, Scott.
I'm not surprised at all, Collin. That was a perfect way to handle the whole keeping the schedule. Collin's always been this guy. He's always got good answers, and I appreciate that. The thing I wondered about is, as time goes on, are your classmates really growing weary of wearing the mask, of having to keep this schedule, of living this way? I at the first of the year on campus, I walked down to the pond. Every child that walked by me had on a mask, and I was so impressed with that. Later, I just walked in a place to pick up something, and a young person walked in with no mask at all, even though it said very clearly, put on a mask, and I just wonder, how are you handling that? Is everyone complying still, or is it getting more difficult?
So I've seen surprising levels of compliance, actually. I will say that because I'm a resident assistant, it's my job to get after people if I don't see them wearing a mask, and so there might be some extent of people see me in the hall and like, oh, the cops are here, let me just pull my mask up. But yeah, we did have issues more towards the start of the semester, either people not taking it as seriously or just not being used to it. But now it's significantly better. And S&T, I can really only speak to my experience here at S&T, but we have generally performed a lot better in terms of cases than the surrounding communities. And I think that attitudes on campus are generally more pro-mask. We really don't have very many issues to struggle with. It can get kind of tiring, but I think I, for one, am used to it. And a lot of the time I feel weird going out not wearing a mask, even if it's a place where it's okay, just because I've grown so used to it. And I think that's the same for a lot of people.
I think we've learned from China's response to COVID. Their culture was such a people are more community-oriented and a little more compliant to government regulations, and I can't help but wonder if S&T has a culture that's a little more amenable toward cooperation and community. Something tells me it's not a real big party school.
Yeah, for most of the year it's not.
I had heard just the opposite, actually.
Oh, okay.
Well, good to know, where do you think you rank in there, Collin?
Again, depends on the time of the year. Patrick's Day has a reputation.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not March yet.
Seems like David knows about that.
But yeah, I do think there is a lot of that kind of community aspect. The dorms that I live in, they are your typical college dorm style. We have the community bathroom and the community kitchen, the lounge and everything. And so you do have to interact with other people all the time. You can't just stay in your room all the time. So there is that community aspect. And I think that a lot of people my age have come to terms with the fact that whether or not we like the restrictions, well, nobody likes the restrictions, but whether or not we think they're necessary or bearable, the path of least resistance is just go with it and it will end soon.
Yeah.
Going out not wearing a mask or anything, that's not going to make it end any sooner, as opposed to just doing your part and helping bring things to a close.
Yeah. Great attitude.
Do you think you're getting support from the community? Are college kids really respected where you're at, and do you feel supported by your community? Are you just separate? I'm wondering, are you just totally separate, or do you feel part of the community there?
S&T is it can be kind of enclosed. It's a pretty small campus, and there's usually not too many reasons one needs to leave campus. Even if they're going out to eat or something, there are restaurants right by. Especially in recent times, we've seen more support from the community. I know that the city council of Rolla talks to the school a lot, and I think that the success in the school's policies of social distancing and mask wearing had a hand in the fact that Rolla just passed a mask ordinance a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
So there is some interaction there, but I wouldn't know too much more beyond that.
So do you have classes online when you're on campus, or you have some in-person classes?
All of my classes this semester were online, and most of them were asynchronous, where the professor pre-records a lecture and just uploads it, and so you can kind of take it at your own pace whenever you want, which is good because it gives me a lot of flexibility in my schedule, but it's bad because it means it's very easy to not do things. I've had times where I'm studying for a test in my math class, and so I just don't watch any other lectures for any other class for like a week until I get done with the test, and then I binge watch everything and get caught up.
Like Netflix.
Exactly.
So you're not one of the students who will just kind of escape doing everything on time and then catching up in the last moment. So you're not known to be a procrastinator, as I remember.
I wouldn't call it procrastinating. I'd call it strategic allocation of my time. Right? There's nothing urgent about watching this lecture. I can get to it later, but for now I need to study. But I do know some people do have a lot of classes on campus. I think they're planning on having more in-person classes next semester. There's still a lot online. But for a lot of people, it is mostly online. I have residents on my floor who only really live here in name only. They spend all of their time at home and just come down for maybe a weekly lab or a test or something.
Mm-hmm. So did you have anybody who got infected, positive, on campus? And how did you, if you did, how did you manage that, being in charge of many students?
I don't play, as an RA, I don't have too much of a role in that. My goal is to make sure that everyone is complying with masks and room occupancy limits. We have had a couple people who have tested positive on my floor, and a decent number of people who have had to go into quarantine because they might have been exposed. But generally, that is something that gets taken care of by the school. Has a contract tracing team. They have student health resources, and so I'll usually be notified of a resident in quarantine after the fact. I'll just get my boss will send me a message saying, "Hey, this resident's in quarantine." Check in with them online, make sure they're doing okay, and then we have housing available for those residents. We encourage them to go home if they can, but for a lot of people, we know that's not safe, and so we do house them in a different part of campus until their 2 weeks are up.
Unless somebody has a question at this point, we received a question. David, do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
My daughter, I don't know where you are in your college journey, but my daughter, 2 years ago, signed her letter of intent to play golf for Wichita State and was headed into like the best time of her life. And now there's no golf.
Oh boy.
She's online and she has an apartment in Wichita, but doesn't spend a whole lot of time there. Do you feel like you're kind of, I don't want to be as dramatic as saying being robbed of your, but do you feel like the experience is a little bit less than, and does that kind of work on you every now and then?
It does, yeah. And I do, I know it's much worse for the freshmen this year who, this has been their entire freshman year, has been like this. And it's definitely disappointing. I know it was bizarre and weird and kind of sad last semester because I lived in an apartment-style dorm last semester, so I had 7 roommates, and we were super good friends. We got along really well, and it was really sad to have to say goodbye to them several months sooner than we were hoping to. And even now, it feels, being on campus just feels kind of timeless. Like, I know I'm in college, and things are going well, but nothing's really happening. There's normally always something going on campus, be it employers are there handing out free stuff or there's an event going on. That doesn't really happen so much anymore. I know a lot of the student life organizations have done a decent job of transitioning to online, but it's much easier to let that stuff slip by when you can just stay in your room all day.
I would imagine that one of those employers is Garmin.
It is.
The company I work for.
It is, and a coworker of mine is actually leaving next semester to go work for them. So,
Not surprised.
I had kind of a follow-up question to that I'm curious about. I really feel like, high school kids, elementary kids, middle school kids are really missing out on a lot of their education this year. It's just not the same, and I don't see them making the same progress. You think you've been cheated out of an education, or do you really feel like the quality of what you're learning is probably about the same as it would have been otherwise?
Yeah, college is a lot different from previous forms of education because there's a lot more of an expectation on the students to be a self-starter and figure it out yourself. So professors are a lot less accessible nowadays, but they were never that accessible to begin with, and so if you have problems with the course content or whatever, college teaches you to mostly figure it out find ways of solving that online, and so going to online classes hasn't made much of a difference in that. There are some, I think I've made the transition to online a lot better than some people. I know some people really do have issues focusing on an online lecture because they're in their room, so there's all kinds of distractions and stuff. And I do feel that, but less than most. But there are some cases where it gets much easier being online. I've had professors who have moved it so we take our tests online and we're allowed to use our notes, which makes things really great. It makes them much easier. So it's a mixed bag. I would say I've been luckier than most, but online has some advantages, and I don't think that I'm losing too much educational opportunity.
I imagine it depends somewhat on your learning style. I think we have one granddaughter who has taken to online learning very well, and another that is struggling with it a little bit. And I imagine it varies from person to person.
Yeah, for
Absolutely.
sure. I like having online lectures, especially the pre-recorded ones, because the way I take notes, I like to be really detailed, because I know when I come back to it later, I'm going to want all that information.
Yeah.
And so being able to pause a lecture, go back, rewind things again and again is really useful to me. And it kind of makes me wonder what I'm going to do when we go back to in-person, because I'm very slow at note-taking, but we'll figure it out.
I have a question about, again, coming back to comparing different generations, that all the generations overall surprisingly handle COVID much better, because they already have life established. They have, most of them have homes and cars, and they have hobbies, and so they kind of established more, and so the stress surprisingly hits younger people more. And especially in terms of loneliness and anxiety and depression. And again, since you have so many students around you and you in a way are in charge to help them, so I want to start with you first of all. So we just received a question on that topic, and that's what I want to run it here. So that's a question we have, and the question is, what has been the most challenging part of this pandemic for you from this point?
That's a good question. Most challenging part. I would say that it has been really challenging to be able to focus and be productive, not only on schoolwork, but just on things that I find fulfilling. Being in my room all day, it feels like I'm kind of in a limbo, and so when it feels like my entire life is free time, I never really feel the incentive to get anything done. And even if it's just doing something to relax, I might want, in a normal world, if I have an hour or so of free time, I might take that time to do something fulfilling, read a book or something, whereas now I can just mess around on my phone for hours on end and just let the time slip away because nothing is happening. So I've been very fortunate in being able to transition through the pandemic pretty well, but I'm always focusing on trying to be more productive and make the most of my time, and that's been very difficult when time isn't really real anymore.
And it's interesting that, because we know you for being so multi-talented, and of course that's what you just said, that you have so many different things going on, and so it's hard to find probably time to sit down and start feeling bad for yourself. But some other students probably do, and that's what I thought. When David comes back, maybe he will help us to those who are viewing us today, who are participating, to get some answers. So how to avoid the depression and loneliness and anxiety, especially being away from family. So at this time, Candy and Scott, do you have any questions to Collin? While you're thinking, I want to remind you that when I invited you, I thought of your talent to be in a theater. You're
yes.
wonderful, wonderful performer. You're a great speaker. You're in the choir. You're a Chilean award winner, and so many things you've done. Just in this, I know you're very humble, but
Is that,
it's
oh
just,
man, leave me alone.
personally, since I've met you 3.5 years ago, I was really impressed. Just like so many talents, and you and your brother and your sister, all of them are so talented. But since you are our guest, was it really difficult for you not to have that opportunity to do what you really love doing? Trying yourself in new fields, trying absolutely some. But what I noticed about you, you are not shy and you do not try to escape new challenges. You constantly seek them. So in this time, how did it affect you?
Well, you'd be surprised actually, because COVID has, while it has closed many doors for the time being, it's also opened a lot more. I would say, you mentioned theater, and throughout high school I was in musicals and plays and stuff. It's something I really love to do. But this semester I've done a lot more theater than I did last year when we were in
Really?
person.
Wow.
Because
How in the world did you do that? You're gonna have to explain it. How are you doing theater?
believe it or not, Missouri University of Science and Technology has a theater professor, one whole theater professor, and he has done really well in navigating this. He has he's done his best to keep theater alive and well in this new time, and even explore how it can be different. So we put on plays over Zoom, including earlier this semester. I was in a first of its kind, brand new play that was a choose your own adventure style play over Zoom. So you'd watch a scene carried over Zoom, and then 2 links would get posted in the chat, and you'd click one to follow a character and see what they do next. And so it was a lot of fun, and it's also something that you can't even do in person.
Yes.
So there's all sorts of unique opportunities that happen as a result of COVID. That's a project that never would have been done probably had we not been forced to do that.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, David, we had a question to you when you stepped away for a minute. That many students, younger generations, was hit harder in terms of depression, anxiety, and loneliness. And of course, it affects mental health. So, would you give us some ideas and some maybe tips for young students like Collin, and for those who work with students, and for parents, how to help them?
Okay. I think maybe it's the under 30 group. There's not this stockpile of experiences in life to draw on, to where it's this, hey, we've been through this before. I remember probably the last time I really got together with friends, and it was kind of like, okay, this looks like it's real. It was back in March, and we're all about the same age. We were kind of like, we've overcome all these things. How different is this going to be? And I think having a storehouse of experience helps. When you don't have that, I think it's there's a lot. I think about, like, I don't call this a bad year. I call this a different year. I hear a lot, just a while ago on TV, 2020, well, okay. But I think it's just been a different experience. And now, I will say, as time goes on, this message gets a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, I was like, hey guys, I had clients that were class of 2020 high school, class of 2020 in college. And I was like, hey, this is a kind of representative of what life can be like, is you work, you plan, you put it together, you get it all just ready to go, and then something completely outside of your control happens. And it's like pulling out that one last peg of the Jenga thing, and you got to start all over again. And I think sometimes, it's an awareness of, this is different. What can I learn from this? Because I think it sounds like, Collin, you might be somebody that 15, 20 years from now, you'll be like, hey, I've been through the pandemic. I went to college during the pandemic, so come on now. Yeah, and people, really? That's bothering you? And I think but you have also found ways to manage this and find the silver linings. That was another thing I started with was, guys, there's going to be some silver linings in this. Our family, we're not the most connected. And I thought, okay, maybe we could do Zoom calls together. And we got on Zoom calls, and you could kind of tell we weren't the most connected. But I noticed about the second or third Zoom call that my father was loving this Zoom. He was getting to see all of his grandkids on one screen, silver lining. And I was like, there was part of me that's like, and my dad has said that since then, I hope we keep doing this. But there was part of me that was like, why haven't we been doing this more often? Yeah, and I think that's true of a lot of things, I went into the bank the other day, they've got a whole new system that I don't even understand, but it was 1,000 times. I'm like, why weren't we doing this like 5 years ago?
Yeah, that's very.
So I think there's an awareness. There is. Also being honest. If you're feeling down, there's part of that. I think another thing I talk about is, let's say all of us run like on the scale of 0 to 10. All of us run at a 0.5 pre-COVID average. Well, March came, we're up to like 8.5. And then we start getting used to it. Then we really get used to it. Then it kind of gets crazy. But I think a lot of people think, well, I'm coping okay. I'm back to my 0.5 when I don't think that's true. I think we're at a 1.5 because, if I go to the grocery store and I'm picking up my gallon of milk and I want to get in and out as fast as I can, and I go to the 10 items or less aisle and somebody has a grocery cart, I'm not nearly as tolerant as I used to be because I'm at a 1.5 instead of a 5. And I think being aware of things like that is helpful too. I think the thing, that I don't know, because what I work with are people that, I've got people that come in that are like, coronavirus is like 15th on my list of things to worry about right now. So I don't always get a true read. But I do have the interesting situation, I'm one of the last of the baby boomers. I married one of the first of the Gen Xers. I have a son from way back that's a millennial, and then I've got 2 teenagers and grandkids. So, and each one of those, it's interesting. I had the influence of, my grandfather talking about going to the University of Missouri during the Depression. Wow. And I was a pretty self-centered, nutty kid, but I heard him talk about that and was like, wow, that's, my father lived in poverty growing up, and when he went to law school, his dad gave him $50 at the beginning of the semester and said, have a nice time. And he somehow did that. So I don't know if some of this is just through the, when you have that generational, because I think my kids this was the thing that caught me off guard, was my children were worried about me. I wasn't worried about me. It crossed my mind every now and then. Sure. But when my youngest came to me and said, I just realized that my parents are older than my friend's parents, and then started crying, I was like, okay, this is a bigger deal than, and she's been that way all the way through. And I put it this way, she's a lot like me when I was 18, and she's wearing a mask. So, I don't know that I would have been that compliant at that age. So I think, those are some of the things. If there's anything like in specific areas of that, like the anxieties or the,
Yeah, you raised a lot of really, really good points there. I like that analogy of the 0 to 10. We're at a 1.5 now, and that is something I notice is even if someone is not directly always freaking out about COVID, it's just little anxieties that build up over time. I'm standing in line waiting to get food in the cafeteria, and the guy behind me is standing 2 feet away, and he's got his nose sticking out from under his mask. Now that's in the back of my mind. All these little anxieties that kind of build up, and if people aren't being cognizant of that and trying to dispel that, then it's just corrosive as time goes on. Even if there's nothing that's specifically getting you down, it just all builds up. And you're right that people of older generations have been not through nothing like this. Obviously, this is unless someone is over a century old, they have not experienced anything like this.
Yeah, this is new for everybody. So.
Yeah, but they have been through all sorts of crises and been old enough to understand them and make it through them. I mean, in my time, we've been kind of in one long constant crisis for many, many years now, but most of us haven't really been old enough to appreciate it or be in a place where you can be super impacted by it. And so older adults, they have households that they live in and stay in. Their life is oftentimes largely rooted in their family and they've had years to build up these strong communities and strong bonds. And so those are very useful to them in this time.
Right.
While people my age, that's kind of the defining struggle of our generation is searching for a community and a place that we can call our own, and this just throws a huge wrench in the works.
And of course, you've come, Collin, from a pretty healthy family, right?
Mm-hmm.
A pretty what's the word I'm looking for? But some of your classmates may have come from more dysfunctional families, and so their efforts to establish community and understand community seems like it would be challenged under these circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are some people who college is their home now, and their family are the people in the clubs that they're in and the people that they live with. And so when now you can't, maybe your club isn't meeting at all, or you can't see them in person, you're not meeting any new people because you're not going to classes in person, that can just be nightmarish because it feels like you don't really belong anywhere.
I did kind of wonder if you felt like you could establish that connection when you do have to be online or that you're meeting people. Is it real? I wondered that because I've always got to talk to people face to face, and I see so much by being able to be with someone and understand so much more, I think. Do you feel like you're getting there even though it's online? Are you so used to that for you it's second nature, whereas for me it's still a little unusual maybe?
The friendships people make online are definitely of a kind of different character than those in person. That's not to say that they're worse. People make some of their best friends over social media or through group chats and stuff, but it is definitely different. I was lucky this year because I am a resident assistant, and so coming into this job, I have been forced to meet a whole bunch of new people. There are some 20 other RAs in my building. I get along with all of them really well. I know all my residents. I know a lot about them, and I consider myself friends with a good number of them. So I've been fortunate in that regard to be able to meet a lot of new people in that way. If I had just been in my old dorm or living on my own or something, I don't know if I would meet any new people this semester. Because I have, you maybe recognize a couple names that you have in a few different classes, but you're never talking to them outside of that context, and certainly not meeting them in person. So I've been fortunate in that regard, as in many regards. But I think that online friendships can form, and they do have their place. They're certainly better than no friendship at all.
Sure.
But it's very hard, even in the best of times, to bring that then into the in-person world and to form a relationship in that regard.
I have a question. That's a very good question, Candy, you asked about building relationships online. Because, and maybe David will correct me, and Scott and Candy, but I want to ask you a question. Since, are you familiar with the rule 7:38:55? And this is about our communication. So, which means that we communicate, 55% of our communication is our body language. 38 is vocal expressions, and only 7% are actual words. Did you think about this ever? But so imagine that. So we, in a way, lost this huge opportunity to express our body language, because when we are texting or we are messaging or we are on podcast, anywhere. So that's what I think Zoom and this particular opportunity to have our faces and kind of gestures is very helpful. But for young people, is it not a loss? And also, Candy's question, you build relationships online, and so how? Maybe you could teach even older adults, because we rely on that body language, we rely on our expressions in a voice, but in a text, it's lost. But somehow you handle that, so it seems like younger generation knows a different way to communicate. So teach us today.
Oh, okay. All right, we're doing this now. Okay. Yeah. So it's definitely true that communication works very different online and through text, and it is something that you just kind of have to pick up as you go along. I don't know how specific you want to get, but like I know a lot of older, more aged people that I know that when they are posting online or texting me or something, they're very neat in how they talk. You know, capitalization, full punctuation.
Oh, absolutely.
But
Yeah.
like when I'm reading my text and I see a sentence ending in a period, I think, oh, this is serious. I'm in trouble. Or someone is saying. When they're just saying, oh, hey, how are you doing today? And so there's also.
So what is it? What up my skillet?
There's all sorts of little bits of lingo and syntax and stuff that, while it may not be correct to the Oxford Dictionary, it's just how it works. You know, if someone is typing in all caps, it means they're shouting or they're trying to draw attention to something. When if they're talking in lowercase, they're just chatting and relaxed. I rarely, when I post on Twitter and stuff, I rarely capitalize any words. It makes me feel too formal. And then, of course, all the abbreviations, the LOLs and OMGs. So it's a very different dialect, but over time, you do learn to communicate the intentions and tones and stuff online. But you are right, it is a lot more difficult than being in person. And there are many times that I feel like I have put off the wrong kind of message when I speak to someone online and I worry, oh, how did that come across? And make them think they're in trouble.
That's what
I use a lot of emojis. Would you advise me
There you go.
stop it, Candy? Too much. You're aging yourself.
Emojis is also another realm. People do use emojis a lot to communicate, and I'd say they're definitely helpful. I don't love them personally. Again, I think it's makes me feel a bit too formal, like, oh, I'm putting all the work in to type this emoji to express my feelings. That's too much for me. But the emojis are a valid form of communication, so you won't be ostracized if you use them. All right.
What is this world coming to?
Absolutely. Also, there are lots of conflicts happen over those either caps or exclamation points or periods, and of course older generation does not know about it. And I remember how I used to lose sleep over somebody calling me in the evening and in a kind of agitated voice telling me some kind of complaints. Then I don't sleep. So now if I receive an email with caps, it's somehow my body responds the same way, or a text message in caps, and then I reach out and I just like carefully are you upset? Oh, no. I just thought it was an important topic, and I thought, goodness, I almost lost my sleep over that. But so also another issue of that is auto-spelling. Because sometimes when I look at what I just sent,
No, yes.
And I just like, oh no, I don't want to meet this person ever in my life because they probably think bad of me because you touched something, what you did, something came out of your fingers that you didn't mean. So in this case, of course, there are different ways to around that, but it's kind of, there are funny things about communication now. But I'm glad you kind of enlighten us a little about how to how to handle that and not to get overstressed, but also not to use caps, not to use exclamation points and the caps. Anything on that topic?
You don't need to be too formal when you're messaging youngsters, at least. You know, you don't worry about being perfect with your spelling and capitalization and stuff. Honestly, it's more noticeable when you do. So.
Wow, okay.
More noticeable that you're novice, right? Okay, we're trainable, I promise. Another question I have, when we had this interesting conversation and we had a segue to communication, but I want to bring it back. Because when we talked about different generations, and I also remembered your grandfather Don and your grandma Wanda, and your grandparents on your dad's side. So, and I know how loving you are. You always listen, and of course that's what we don't want to get lost during COVID. And like you said, you have a specific time when you call your family. But I want to ask you about this question. When we talked about how different stress level is for young people, but it is also different for different, like Scott says, different families, right? So if you are from a very healthy family and very supportive family, then of course you're much ahead in terms of your emotional health, hopefully, right? So people benefit from that. Could be other issues, right, David? But also, it depends on the culture you're raised in. And what I found out reading about millennials, that Indian millennials handle COVID absolutely perfectly. And then I thought, why? And I've read that they are very resilient. So in their culture, they are very resilient. They're raised that way. And so, and I know your grandfather Don, and his absolutely amazing sense of humor. So what did you learn from your grandfather that maybe helps you now in this time, and also maybe just simply being away from family? Is it any helpful advice that you received from your grandparents that makes you resilient?
That's a good question. I think that definitely having a sense of humor in the current times is crucial. Accept the absurdity of our current day and age and roll with it to the extent that you can. Things can be silly if you make them so, and that's not to say that you should downplay the significance of a pandemic and everything, but find the levity in the situation where you can. Sorry, I keep kicking my table.
Yeah. And that's very valuable, and that's what I think. It's very important for families to have these very close relationships with grandparents and between grandparents with grandchildren and great grandchildren. So, any other questions at this point?
I'm kind of curious about how you handle the as a young, again back to the under 30. There's in some parts of our current culture, there's almost like a gaslighting going on regarding the mask, whether the pandemic is even real or not, or if this does this or if that does that. And you can think, I feel this way, but then when I go out, I hear. And I think the interesting thing is I have clients that are in Missouri, which at times seems to have some different ideas about things. And I have Kansas, and then I spent 2 months out in Arizona, and it's like 3 different places in the way they handle that. But I'm just curious, I know me as, at my age, I'm just kind of like, you think what you want, but this is what I'm wearing my mask, and I don't really care. I will stare at you funny, where if I were 25, I might not be that brazen. And, so do you even, I think you get what I'm talking about. So how do you manage that?
Yeah. Well, I think that, obviously, the science should be trusted, but, view the skepticism, of course, but trust people who know what they're talking about and think about it, of course. And I encourage people to just make, kind of the utilitarian consideration of it. What is in your best interest? I could walk around not wearing a mask, and I might be fine. Odds are I probably would get sick, but I might not have any problems. But what if I do get sick? What if I do have problems? I could die. I could have permanent lung damage. We're just finding out now. It feels like every day there's some new horrifying long-term consequence of COVID.
Right.
And when you compare that to, I have to wear a mask and it makes my acne a little worse, the choice is obvious. I'm going to wear the mask. And if not just for me, then for the other people that could hurt more. That's not to say I don't want to, just argue from authority, scientists say it, so we should listen to scientists. But when there's an overwhelming preponderance of evidence towards something, and the downsides of listening to that are negligible, I think it's worth doing so.
Yeah.
The Rolla City Council, when they were discussing whether or not to have a mask ordinance in the city a couple weeks ago, they had a public forum for it. I watched it live streamed. It was mostly unpleasant. It was a very long meeting with some very opinionated people. But what you would have is, a handful of people coming up and saying, I don't think we should wear the masks. I don't think they work, what have you. And then a doctor or a nurse from the local hospital would come up and say, all right, great that you think that. The ICU is filling up. We're not going to have a place to put the patients that are coming in, so we need to pass this mandate. And so listening to people who are on the front lines and trusting that fact is important.
And it's very important what you just discussed, because it's strange to me, because since I'm from a different culture, I pay attention to what other cultures publish and what they post and what kind of discussions they have. And so it really hurt my feelings when I read that one of the expatriate from my country, or former country, he writes so passionately about human freedom. And he says that I would rather die than I will wear the mask. And so unfortunately now the same attitude applies to vaccination. So I would rather die than I will have this needle in my body. And so, and I think it's important maybe for us at the end of our podcast to talk about it, because we are talking about coping. And coping, like last week we talked about coping with information. And then, of course, now when it is a life-threatening pandemic and people still have this discussion about freedom, it really sounds so inhuman to me, because we forget that we are not individuals. Yes, we are, but we also are part of the community. And I just don't understand that, and that's what I think it hurt me so bad, that even people who are from the same country as I am, who were raised with this sense of, first of all, it's community. And especially during the war, everybody knows that the priority is to save as many people as possible. So nobody thinks about hunger, nobody thinks about personal interests, but everybody puts all the efforts and attention to save as many people as possible. So how could we do that? And I'm so proud of you that you say that younger people comply better. But all the people, it's just outstanding how they think and how they talk, and not all. But so why is that? It's like almost people are suicidal. They know that all the people will die, but in the last 14 days, the number of deaths went 49% up. 49. Not 4, 49. And they still talk about the freedom not to wear the mask and not to get a vaccination. So what do you think about vaccination, Collin? Will you get a vaccine, and when? Or you will wait? And what other younger people say?
So I want to start off by saying that I think that the position of individual freedom that some people push for, I don't think that it can really be substantiated. So where we're at now with the pandemic is, so on 9/11 in 2001, about 3,000 or so people died, and that has been one of the most consequential events in American history. Right, the entire scene of the global scene has changed as a result of it, and we've accepted, as a result of that action, certain permanent changes to our freedoms. Now we have the TSA going through your stuff whenever you're going to get on a plane. You have to take off your shoes and everything. We're being surveilled all the time, just as a result of now the anti-terrorist infrastructure that's in place. And now with the pandemic, we are at about a 9/11's worth of people dying every single day.
Yeah.
And people can't be bothered to wear a mask and not go out to eat. And so, if people are of the position that they have these freedoms that shouldn't be infringed, that's fine, but apply it consistently. At the city council meeting I was talking about, a nurse came up and shared this anecdote that I thought was really powerful and has kind of stayed in my mind since then. She told a story of how a student was at a lecture given by Margaret Mead, who is a famous anthropologist. And the student asked Mead, what is the first evidence of human civilization? And everyone was expecting her to say, a stone tool or some evidence of agriculture or something. No, she said that the first evidence of human civilization was a femur, a human leg bone, that had been broken and then healed back together.
Wow.
So in the animal kingdom, a broken leg is a death sentence. You can't run from predators, you can't hunt for food, you can't go get water. If you break your leg, you are essentially dead, unless there's someone to take care of you. And so what Anita's saying is this bone is evidence that some ancient human broke their leg, incapacitated for months, and yet there were people there who had the ability and the resources and the compassion to take care of them. They didn't have to do that. They could have just left this person behind. They might have even been better off. But because they felt that social obligation to care for one another, care for vulnerable people, and to look out for them, even if it's putting their own lives at risk, that, she said, is what civilization is people working together, taking care of those who are weak or in trouble, even at our own expense, because it's better off for everyone and because we have a duty to do so. And I think that is extremely applicable here, where, it sucks, I know. I don't like wearing the mask, I don't like not getting to see my friends, but if doing those things makes life easier for an essential worker who wants to go home and stay safe and spend time with their family, but they can't because they have to work to eat, or for someone with comorbidities or who is old who can't afford to get sick, I will gladly do that because that is the cost of participating in and being a part of society. That's my obligation to do so. And so to answer your question, yes, I do intend to get the vaccine. I haven't been following too closely the news of it being rolled out. I imagine that I won't have the opportunity to for a while since I'm not really in a at-risk category. But when the opportunity does come around, I do intend to get the vaccine.
Yes, that whole
Same.
very good.
Thank you.
That I have hope for our world. Collin, just based on what you said, that things could, working for the common good. That is just something that is so important to me, and I appreciate that very much. And I am glad to be elderly now because I will be in that first group getting a vaccination. Close. Now, no, I'm not in a nursing home, and I'm not a caregiver, so I'll have to wait a bit, but I won't have to wait too long. Maybe.
And I really, yes, thank you. And I really, so happy that you came and spoke to us today, because what you just said, I think is so important for everybody to hear. Because it used to be the time when younger people were reprimanded publicly in a grocery store or outside on the street, like, oh, you need to pull up your slacks, or you need to cut your hair,
Cut your hair.
something. But now it's interesting that younger people tell older people, sir, very politely, please pull your mask up. And so it's just interesting how the world changed. And also, I think it's beautiful that we used to look down at women who wore veils covering their faces. And we demanded that everybody has the face shown. And how ironic I found it that during COVID, it's actually all changed. And now we all have to cover our faces. And I think this is what community is. That we all are different, but we all value each other and respect each other. And that's what I think I've heard in your message. It's very important. Thank you, Collin. Anything you want us to hear at the end, and maybe any other questions at the end?
Well, yeah, thank you very much for having me on. This is a lot of fun. I didn't really know what to expect going in, but I really enjoyed it, and I hoped I shed some light on some of the youth experience. Obviously, everyone is experiencing things differently, and as I've said many times, I have been very fortunate in other regards. I don't have to be working right now. I don't have classes in person. I don't have to worry about a lot of that stuff. But like you said, it's very easy to get after the kids. Us youth. I know our music is weird and our fashion sense is weird, and the way we talk online is weird. But we are all going through this in our own way, and we all have a lot of different struggles that you all don't at the stage you're at in your life. And so let's keep that in mind and keep looking out for each other. And the kids are all right, so don't get after us too much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And also, I would love to have you back. Don't you think, everybody? Maybe like in a few months, because you also wanted, you could talk about, student debt, how younger generation handles that, about the cost of education, the cost of health system. So anything that is an inspiration to you, we will be happy to have you back.
I love seeing you, Collin.
There are a lot of unique issues that young people face that people your age either haven't faced in years, or these are completely new things that I think a lot of people don't understand. So I'd be definitely happy to shed some light on those.
Absolutely. Thank you. Please continue being resilient and help your students and be connected to your family. We love you, Collin. Thank you, David. Thank you, Candy. And thank you, Scott. Thank you.